Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Rewriting the Fates. Today we're going to continue our draft a little bit and write what I like to think of as the calm after the storm, or even the eye of the storm, sort of a deceptive calm. Of course, last time we wrote this big section that started really small with just some chords and then built up to this big explosion, thunderous, regal even. And today it's going to instantly become calm, but there's going to be some deceptive qualities to it. And so, without further ado, let me play what we will be rewriting. So, just about the next minute of this piece is what we're going to be working on today. Fun fact, this is actually the section that the name The Fates actually came from, of course, because we got 3 instruments here. I don't know which was which, and of course the Greek Fates, past, present, and future, and I honestly don't know much about this story in reality. I just was like, ooh, 3 instruments, The Fates, and it sounds kind of eerie like that. So, the idea here was to have 3 solo instruments, which are the cello, the clarinet, and the bassoon, sort of interweaving and playing with this melody that we have thoroughly introduced in this first section. And then the second section is when it becomes more stable, again with the new formulated melody that was introduced right at the end of the first section. So when you're looking at this score, I'm noticing that it is almost empty. There are, of course, the 3 soloists, but almost every other instrument, actually every other instrument, just rests throughout this entire section. There's nothing there. So I want that to change. I want there to be more complex things, maybe little hints of other instrumentation. I also want to clean up some of this stuff. I also don't know if I like this speed up that I have. I kind of like the pulse that we started with, and I don't think it needs to speed up here. I think we just need to wait for this next section, which will get faster. So with those things in mind, let's jump right into it. All right, so we're back on the new score. And the first thing I want to do is just lay out this whole section. And I'm going to do that by rewriting the 3 soloists. And I just want to make it cleaner, touch it up so that it doesn't sound odd, and I want it so that each individual part sounds like it could be the melody. So I'm going to do that, and then we'll come right back. All right, and we are back. I have right here outlined all of the solos for this new section. Now that being said, it still needs quite a bit of work, but let's go over what I've done so far. So first of all, down at the bottom here we have our solo cello. And that sounds like this. And then after the first phrase, the clarinet up here joins, and that sounds like this. And finally, after the first phrase of the clarinet, the third instrument, the bassoon, joins in right here. And of course, all three of those together sound like this. So let's talk about it in a little more detail. So I wanted to keep the essence of the original was saying with the three soloists, kind of riffing on these triads and not really straying from them, and just seeing how much I can get away with without leaving these 3 to 4 pitches. That being said, I realized it kind of needs to break it a little bit. And so the first time it does that is, of course, right here on this chord in the clarinets, where it has the A natural. And that chord sounds like this. Weird chord. But it adds some tension and it shows you that it's going somewhere. And then, of course, we have the leading tone into G in all 3 instruments in a unison right at the end. Now, I like how these voices all interchange with each other and fill the gaps where the other voices are holding a note. It just works really well. The problem I have with it is, first of all, it's coming from this huge section, and I don't think the transition is very good. I'll play a couple measures so you can hear what I'm talking about. So it just, there needs to be something else. I tried adding a little bit of a percussion, the cymbal carries over a little more, and then I experimented with these rolls on the timpani and the bass drum, and I kind of want to play with that a little more. To me, it feels like distant thunder, and I like that. And I want to experiment with maybe some swells of thunder. And then riffing on that theme, maybe some interjections for some of the other instruments, like a flute run, flute and piccolo runs, maybe some oboe in there as well. maybe some hits in the horns or the trumpets. Maybe the low brass can do the waves with the bass drum and the timpani. So I just want to add something to make it feel more substantial. And then towards the end here, I reach this chord again. And then in the clarinet, I wanted it to feel like it was going somewhere right at the end. And so that's why I made the clarinet have this little faster rhythm, and it has more of a progression and a sequence to it. And that's this. And so I want to take that opportunity to bring back the ticking clock from earlier. And so we'll go from this rolling thunder back into this ticking, and then we'll take it into the next section where right now I wrote this, and this was what I was going to put in the first section, and I decided it didn't belong there, and I'm experimenting with maybe adding it here, and I just put it there for now, and I might change it, but that sounds like this. I like it. The only thing I don't like about it is that it goes back to the original theme before we expanded it and developed it into its own more regal theme, which is what the original does, is it goes back to the big theme and the explosion in the trumpets. So I need to figure out what I want to do there, and I need to fill in all of these other parts, make this part more substantial while somehow keeping the solo voices more exposed and make it feel more empty. So I'm going to spend probably quite some time figuring out how to do that, and I will come back when it's all done. And we are back, and as you can see, there is a lot more on our page here. So I think what I want to do is I'll play it first, and then I'll break it down a bit. I'm going to start from the big explosion so that you can hear the transition. I still think the transition needs a little bit of work, but I'll play it for you nonetheless. Here we go. What do you think? I think I'm starting to like it. It took me a while to get to that point, but I think we have something that at least feels solid and feels cohesive and doesn't just feel like a bunch of random interjections, which is where it was for a while. So, we already talked about the soloists. They kind of set the framework for the whole thing. Now let's talk about all of the new stuff. So the first thing I wrote, and I think I talked about this earlier, but initially I had one measure where there was these timpani and the bass drum rolling, and I really liked that, and I wanted to continue it. So I did just that. But I didn't just keep it stagnant, because I wanted there to be something to it. So what I did is I just added these gradual crescendos and decrescendos to shape it a little. And what it sounds like is rolling thunder. And I heard that, and I wanted to do way more with it. So, first of all, one thing I did is I made sure that each of these swells was slightly different. So this one goes up to piano, this one to mezzo piano, this one to mezzo forte. Every single one is different. And then also towards the end, the swells, now only in the timpani, but they're only in one measure instead of what it was before, where it was a swell over two measures. And so I just wanted to vary up the thunder and make it feel alive. The second thing I wanted to do is add a little bit more texture, as if rain is around us. And that is what you see in all these trills. So the flute has them at first, and then it gets put into the tenor sax and the bass clarinet and the oboe, and just gradually more and more voices gain them, and there's also some of the strings down here. And so what I did with these, and you'll notice all of these have accidentals. Where are they? So this one's F sharp, and this one's A natural. However, since it's a trill, it's trilling F sharp G, A natural B, A natural B. So what it basically is doing is it's trilling from the note below a note in the chord up to a note of the chord, so it ends up sounding right. And what I also did is I made the rain work with the thunder. So it has a great big swell right at the end, right when the thunder hits each time. And that's also every 4 bars. And then when the swells happen every bar, we have a bigger swell over the bar line as well. And that's in these rain parts. And then the final piece of the storm that is, of course, surrounding us in this moment is the lightning. And that, of course, are these grace notes starting in the piccolos, and the flute gets them, and the soprano sax, and the trumpet has one. And the idea with these was just to finalize the storm, because of course we had the thunder and we had the rain, but the one thing we didn't have was the lightning. And so these strike right at the big swell points, usually with the rain, usually with the thunder, except for right at the end here, but always as these swells hit, and that's every 4 bars, and then every bar right at the end. Then there's one more thing we haven't talked about yet, and that's of course the pulse. And I believe I did talk about this before, but I did bring it back. We have the ticking clock in the percussion, this time on a tom and the bass drum. Yeah, I also finally found a place to add a tam-tam, which I've been wanting to do. I love that instrument, and I wanted to use it, so I did. And I think I have decided, after all, that I do like this trumpet melody here. And I'm gonna have to do something to work around that, because that's, of course, not exactly how the original works. But I'm also trying to figure out what I want to do with the next section anyway. That being said, I did say we were going to get to this next trumpet bit, but I've been working quite some time, and I really want to get a video out, so I think we're going to leave that till next time. This whole section, I realized, sort of sounds like a piece I played last spring in my orchestra concert by a professor at Occidental College named Selka Ojakangas. And that piece, I believe we debuted it, is called Chance of Showers. It's a kind of similar idea, and what it does is this big swell thing where there's 2 sections like it, where things just kind of gradually build. It uses some of these trills and sextuplets and things, and then it has these big washes where it rolls over, kind of like I'm doing here. The only difference is that is the substance of that piece, and there's no melodic line over it. And so, of course, that's where our 2 pieces differ. And of course, I mean, I've made it my own. So, I do quite like it. I do think this transition could still use maybe a little more percussion. The problem is I'm limited on parts and everything, and it's going to be... I need to figure out what I want to do with this transition. And then I need to figure out what I want to do next, because that's going to be a bit different. So, without further ado, I think that's enough for today. I want to edit this video and then get it ready to be released. So I suppose I will see you guys in the next video, where I will write this next trumpet section and if I have time, which I hope I will, get into the new, very contrasting section, which I am very excited for, because it's one of my favorite sections of this piece. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.